And on today's show, how best practice standards for life insurance can be a competitive advantage for your practice. Part 4 of this week's series on product due diligence with nationally recognized product due diligence expert, Barry Flagg, CFP, CLU, and CHFC. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician and Insmart. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to day 4, Barry.
Great being here.
How you doing, babe? The 4 days with Steve Savant. I mean, you know, we're talking about it. Barry's kind of like a cousin, or in my view, not in blood, but in thinking.
Long lost.
I'm a long lost, and I cut my teeth on due diligence, and whatever persona I have in the public domain came in the early 90s when I fell in love with Townsend and Ship Report, when I started reading, I talk about insanity, reading the convention blank filings, turning to page 28 and 29 to try to see what the bad boy assets were back in the junk bond days. And really understanding the summary sheet of that, and which came out with EBEX through Vital Signs. Now, today I want to really get down to this whole thing of standards, because I think we look like an unregulated society. Our industry is pretty unregulated. I know we're not, but it looks that way. And when we talk about standardization, first of all, from one carrier to another, their product nomenclature, to what we title things, what we call riders, everybody's all over the board. So we're running into everybody trying to have their own specific dialect by carrier, and then I'm trying to bring that into one area where we can all say, oh, this means this. And I remember for the longest time, we used to do increasing, decreasing. Well, some companies said that's option A, that's option B. It was so confusing. So it's not only standardization that I'm talking about on this level, but you're talking about best practices standardization. And I think that we've heard about this, Barry, but we don't live there every day. Talk about why this is so important and why it could impact our practice.
It's taking a standardized view of life insurance that is consistent with the view that already exists for every other asset on the client's balance sheet, in their estate plan, and in their financial plan. It's taking the nomenclature of the prudent investor nomenclature that is already adopted and near and dear to wealth managers, RIAs, tax attorneys, trust officers. So it's not taking a regulatory standardization, but talking to an advisor, a CPA tax attorney type advisor, about PUAs or extended term riders or reduced paid. I mean, those are our words. That's not their words. So creating a standard that here are the things that prudent people have done for the last century, and now here's how you apply those same principles to life insurance, I think is a differentiator, because again, it's like going to a foreign country and being able to speak their language instead of requiring whoever you want to get a referral from to talk your language.
Well, I think one of the things you just said is, I'm thinking, if I'm a fiduciary and I don't know anything about life insurance, and you just said PUA rider, I have no idea what you just said.
Correct.
I don't know. Rider, I might have an idea. And I think our clients are the same way in many respects. That's why I really tell people, you really need to dump your industrial language and drop your acronyms. To me, this is very important, because we're really trying to convey a message here. And if we don't communicate, then we're not conveying a message.
Correct.
So if I'm looking at all the different ways I could use a dividend, and a paid up addition rider, which is an increase of death benefit, is one of the options, I have to go through that with them. I have to mechanically walk through that. Now, I'm just curious, this is a little off our script here, but I'm just curious, if I'm trying to measure everybody's PU, I'm trying to get down to where I can get some kind of semblance of commonality. All whole life that are participating, they pretty much are going to have a paid up addition rider. Can I compare one rider to another rider to another rider? Am I getting more bang for the buck on one rider than another?
Yes, you certainly can, in a matter of fine tuning, measure one carrier's PUA rider against another's. But the first thing you want to measure is cost of insurance charges, because the cost of insurance charges are 85% of the total cost equation, and there's that 80% swing in cost of insurance charges. So you want to make sure before you start fine-tuning that you have tuned the plan or the due diligence process or the product selection, so that you're at least in the ballpark, and then do your PUA fine-tuning.
Well, I like the ability to look at it at this level, and people say, well, Steve, you guys are so deep in the weeds on this. This is minutia, out of control. But actually, this is the kind of talking points, and this is why we look to products. I have so many software vendors that participate in my practice that I can prep for shows like this, And I've been using them for years. And now we're adding another one to adjunct to our Veralytics. And we're going to be talking about Barry's product all tomorrow and why you may want to use this as part of your practice. I love it, and I think this is where we're going. But when we're talking about comparing different writers and so forth, now we're really in the weeds. But when we're looking at it, I'm just trying to figure out how to talk, as you said, the communication issue. I need to change my language, dump my industrial language, drop the acronyms, and start talking in some kind of language that they're used to. Some of the investment language you used is kind of something that we need to adopt. To me, that's a huge issue. When we come back from the break, we're going to continue our discussion on this because I really want us to get into best practices and really adopt standards so that we can all talk to each other, especially people who we're trying to sell. We'll be right back in about 30 seconds. Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to our second segment. I'm going to give you a little anecdotal story that I had in my own practice way back in the early 90s when Ebix didn't even own them at the time, when Vital Signs came out, and they actually added, which I needed, a vocabulary list to their 4-page profile, company or carrier profile. I needed it. I went through that entire idea, and then I started meeting in my study group, and one of our study group guys was a CPA, and he's been on our show many times, and I actually started learning this is the language that they use for balance sheet. And all of a sudden I could talk not only about the ratings of a carrier, but I could now talk about their balance sheet. I was using their language. That to me is just learning that language. It's not that hard.
No, it's more of the same. And it's, instead of, your pool of referral sources increases exponentially if you if you speak their vocabulary instead of requiring that they speak yours.
When you talk about best practices, they have a checklist here that you cite, that you can kind of go down. Do you have a few of those things that you say come to your mind and say, Steve, these are some of the ones that are on that checklist that I think I look at almost every time I'm looking at a case?
We talked about in prior days that life insurance is the largest, most neglected asset on clients' balance sheets. Almost nobody knows what they're getting no one knows what they're being charged, and no one knows what they're actually getting in performance. And it's in my wheelhouse, I'll confess. So yes, that's part of the best practice standards. It's in step 5. All 6 steps would not be unusual to anybody. They'd be familiar to the CPA, tax attorney, and trust officer. And if you can use those 6 steps to talk about life insurance and those 17 dimensions, then you're speaking their language and you have a better chance of getting referrals.
And if you want that, you just want to write me at steve.savant@ashbrokerage.com. We'll get it to you. We'll send it to you. I want to walk through that list. You'll want to walk through the list and try to say, hey, how many do I know of these? Because I think you'll be surprised. As long as we've been in this business, you'll say, oh, this is completely intuitive. I would have known that.
Some of it is.
But I think sometimes you need a sales track. Actually, thinking about that list as a sales track is kind of a funny way to look at it because I think it'll help you. I want to talk about another issue of the due diligence process here, because a lot of people say to really do the job right, I need to spend significant hours. And especially if you're an RIA and you're charging by the hour or whatever, this can be very tedious, and it can be a lot to collect all this information. There is so much software out there, so many vendors like you, Barry, with Veralytics, that have this all ready to go, and price point is really economical. And why I wouldn't do this, I don't want to spend that kind of time on that. I'm into wanting to get in front of people. The analytic among us will love to go ahead and jam the numbers and spend 2-3 hours on this, but our practice is worth more than that, and there's so much going on in the marketplace today. People ask me all the time, Steve, what products are you using from a support point of view? And I use about 9 different software packages. This is a new one for me to adopt into my practice because it takes the industry at large. This is the big thing that we're quantifying. We're going from our micro management of a couple illustrations to now we're looking at what's the big picture against peer groups. What does that look like? Are we in the game? Are we off the curve? Now, in your practice, when you go to or you're coming into your first contact, you're a top of the table producer. You've been doing this for 20 years, hitting those kind of numbers and that kind of premium. What is one of the first contact things that you show in your due diligence process, in your opening statement? You're there for the first time. What are some of the things you're going to show first contact client?
I almost don't show anything the first time. Opening conversation is what we've alluded to is, Mr. CPA, think of your very best client. CPAs are perfect for this because they all have a couple of clients that are their annuity, that make sure that their practice goes, and then they add the balance of their practice. They always have 3, 6 clients that are the core of their practice. They want to make sure that those 3 or 6 clients are taken care of. And so I say, think about those 3 clients. Don't tell me their names. What some insurance company is charging them has nothing to do with their identity. Just think about those 3 clients. The clients that you want to make sure that they know you're taking care of them. Ask them, do they know what they're being charged in their life insurance? Ask them, do they know what they're actually getting in performance? Chances are really good that they do not know the answer to that question, and you can offer to help steward that last asset on their balance sheet that was heretofore neglected. You can help them steward that asset, and as a practitioner, I can help them do the measurement. We do the measurement. If it comes back 5 stars, I just provided a valuable service. I made the CPA look good. He appreciates the work I did for him. If on the other hand it comes back 1 star or 2 stars, there is a substantial opportunity for improvement. We've talked about this 80% swing. So there could be huge cost savings that can be brought to the client, and then now the CPA really looks good and the CPA really likes it. And I got a new client.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas you hear on our show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance department. And don't forget, you can view any of our past episodes at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you tomorrow.